Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. This evening's community input meeting is an important step in establishing a dialogue between City Hall, the police, and you, the community. Your participation tonight will help us gain a much greater understanding of the issues and what you feel should be our priority. We look forward to the information you will bring and the discussions that will follow that will help us shape our plan, the community's plan. Before we get started, we have a video to share, a video that we feel reflects a historical journey that brings us to where we are now. Following the video will be remarks by the Honorable Mayor, Andy Shore. Please show the video at this time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mayor Andy Shore. Many thanks to each of you for joining us tonight for this important discussion. Throughout this nation, a disproportionate number of people of color have been victims of excessive use of force at the hands of police. In addition, historically, people of color have been discriminated against in the workplace, within our communities, and in society in general. Mr. George Floyd died at the hands of 4 police officers who've been charged in his death. Soon after Mr. Floyd died, social justice protests emerged in cities and towns in America and throughout the world. Protesters have marched in the name of justice and equity, calling for the elimination of racism and discrimination in communities, workplaces, and in society in general. Many corporate, government, organizational, and individual leaders have now taken steps to examine brands, policies, procedures, and practices in an effort to address racism and discrimination and to work toward achieving equity. The public response in the aftermath of the videotaped George Floyd murder has rekindled and intensified the national call for reform and the need to have an honest dialogue to address systematic racism and its impact on African Americans and other communities of color. In response to concerns raised within the Lansing community that are consistent with concerns that have been raised throughout the nation, I've taken steps to change policies, having recently released my Racial Justice and Equity Community Action Proposals. My administration is hard at work, taking immediate actions and working on next steps and long-term planning. Please know that I continue to listen to you. I hear you, and I want to hear more. We need your input. We're continuing to examine our policies, practices, and procedures, understanding that when assessing this type of examination, We need widespread input and advice from a diverse range of people who live, work, and visit Lansing. That's why I'm seeking your input through your participation in this community input meeting. We'd also like for you to complete a survey that's available on the city's website. Please share your experiences and stories with us. For additional assistance, I've established the Mayor's Racial Justice and Equity Alliance, and I've appointed a group of highly talented individuals who live and work in Lansing to review all of your input while assessing policies, practices, and biases to gain a deeper understanding of how to end any violence, racism, and racial discrimination in Lansing. The Alliance will develop a racial justice and equity plan for the city. We all want to ensure that the city's plan is community-inspired. That's why we need your input. The Alliance will be co-chaired by Kimberly Coleman, Director of the Department of Human Relations and Community Services for the city, and Police Chief Daryl Green. Teresa Bingman, a Lansing-based attorney with extensive legal and policy experience in civil rights, criminal justice, and social action, will work with the committee as an expert consultant. This conversation provides essential dialogue between police, City Hall, and our community. We need to engage with you, the community, to obtain a full understanding of the issues and priorities. We also have to reaffirm the fundamental principles of policing and build trust while improving the police-community relationship. We know that police reform and racial justice work are interrelated, and these two concepts must coexist to produce, advance, and enact meaningful public policy changes and public safety reforms in our communities. Thank you for your interest in helping Lansing, Michigan's capital city, achieve the goals of racial justice and equity. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for a very important community conversation. We're continuing to listen as you share your thoughts, ideas, and stories. Everyone involved in the process of assessing and prioritizing information and data will thoughtfully consider your input. I want to thank Chief Daryl Green, HRCS Director Kim Coleman, Attorney Teresa Bingman, and our city's IT Director Christopher Mumby for organizing tonight's event. Also thanks to Lori Adams-Simon, a member of the Mayor's Diversity and Inclusion Council, for facilitating this discussion tonight. I look forward to hearing your comments. Now I want to introduce Attorney Teresa A. Bingman, who is a local attorney and an expert consultant on racial justice and equity. Teresa operates the law offices of Teresa A. Bingman, a Lansing firm, and she serves in several other capacities as a consultant and advisor. She has extensive experience in the government, education, and private sectors, having consistently championed civil rights, urban and criminal justice policy issues since starting her legal career in 1988. Teresa, thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Mayor Shore. It is indeed an honor to serve in the role of assisting the city as we seize this moment of history that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would have described as the fierce urgency of now. The video presentation that was created by Hope Rollins of Hope for All Occasions reminds us of how far we have come as it relates to racial justice and equity in America, and how far we still have to go. It's time to go, and we should not stop until we have achieved racial justice and equity in Lansing and beyond. We have goals. Our goals consist of creating a racial justice and equity plan, a roadmap for how we will level the racial justice playing field and achieve equity. We also have a goal to figure out how to improve police policies and practices and police community interactions. When listening to the video, you heard about the special advisory group that the mayor has appointed, the Mayor's Racial Justice and Equity Alliance, the MRJEA. This group of talented individuals who represent city government, various industries, and community-based groups will be critical in putting this roadmap together. We need all of your input, though, to ensure that we are fully aware of the priorities of the community. Tonight, we continue the process of listening to you, members of the Lansing community, to gather ideas, stories, and experiences that will inform the work of the MRJEA. The information that we receive tonight will be combined with information from other town hall meetings, focus groups, and electronic surveys. In addition to listening and speaking up tonight, we urge you to go to the city's website that will be displayed at the end of this meeting to access the electronic survey. We will also provide a telephone number and other contact information at the end of this meeting. We will remain accessible to you. We want to hear from you. Your voice matters. Now, I would like to introduce the individuals who will facilitate the rest of tonight's meeting. Beginning with Mrs. Kimberly Coleman. Kimberly Coleman is the Director of the Department of Human Relations and Community Services, HRCS, for the City of Lansing. Formerly, she has served in leadership roles as Executive Director of the Grand Rapids Bar Association, Executive Director of the Downtown Lansing branch of the YMCA, Executive Director of Single Parent Family Institute, Mental Health Supervisor at Saginaw County Community Mental Health, and Crisis Outpatient Therapy, among other professional roles. Director Coleman currently serves as the chair of the Ingham County Department of Human Services Board of Directors. Director Kimberly Coleman earned her bachelor's degree in social work from Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi, and her master's in social work from the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. Mrs. Kimberly Coleman, thank you. I would like to now introduce Chief Daryl Green, PhD. Chief Daryl Green began his police career at the Lansing Police Department in 1997, graduating from the Mid-Michigan Police Academy, Michigan State University School of Staff and Command, FBI National Academy, and the Police Executive Research Forum Senior Management Institute for Police. Chief Green earned his PhD from Western Michigan University, a master's degree from Michigan State University, and a bachelor's degree from Temple University. Chief Green is a veteran of the U.S. Navy, graduate of the U.S. Naval War College, and current commissioned officer in the U.S. Navy Reserves. I present to you Chief Daryl Green, PhD. And finally, our facilitator for the evening, Mrs. Lori Adams Simon. Lori Adams Simon has resided in the greater Lansing area since 1983. She earned a bachelor's degree in social science as well as a Master of Arts degree in public administration from Western Michigan University. Mrs. Adams Simon serves as the Senior Advisor for Diversity/Inclusion and Civil Rights Coordinator for Sparrow Health System. She is a true servant leader who is committed to giving back to the greater Lansing community. Mrs. Adams Simon served as President of the City of Lansing Board of Ethics for the 3rd Ward for 2 years and has been a board member since 2011. She currently serves as an advisor on the Mayor's Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council. I present to you Mrs. Lori Adams Simon, and I will turn this meeting over to Mrs. Simon. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Teresa. Good evening, Lansing citizens. My name is Lori Adams Simon, and it is an honor to serve as moderator this evening for Lansing's Community Conversation. This conversation will allow the citizens of Lansing to have a voice and be heard. Your input will help the city to improve community relations and provide the city with ideas to develop a plan to create and maintain a welcoming and inclusive environment for all citizens. The format for this evening is as follows. I will pose questions to the audience members. If an audience member would like to answer the question, they will raise their hand, and I will invite no more than 4 participants into the conversation. You will have the opportunity to have your video on or off, and you have 2 minutes to answer the questions. We will begin with questions related to Lansing's environment, and then I will invite Chief Daryl Green into the conversation to pose questions related to the police department. Please note, I am not a city official. I am a community member just like you. So this is your opportunity to share your ideas and have input. If you do have questions, you can please email mrjea@lansingmichigan.gov. So if you're ready, let's get this conversation started. First question. Do you feel comfortable living and working in the city of Lansing? At this time, you would raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized, and the moderator will welcome you in. Please welcome in Loretta Stanaway. Yes. Loretta's in. Do we have any other hands? Yes, we have Loretta Stanway, and then we have Michael Lynn. Loretta, welcome to the conversation. Loretta, I believe you're on mute.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, it is. Welcome, Loretta.
Thank you.
The question was, do you feel comfortable living or working in Lansing?
I would say that is a qualified yes. I've lived in Lansing since 1985, and until approximately 6 or 7 years ago, I would have felt comfortable going anywhere, anytime. That unfortunately is no longer the case. There are now times and places where I would be very cautious going into certain areas at certain times. I have felt, after having spent many hours listening to the police scanner, that the level of crime in Lansing has been on the increase, particularly not so much necessarily violent crime, although that is, to me, seeming to increase as well, but the crimes against individuals, breaking and enterings, assaults, etc., robberies of one kind or another, malicious destruction of property, etc., which has led me to get my CPL. And I'll be honest, I carry whenever I'm out in any place that I can carry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lynn?
Good afternoon, Ms. Simon and all Lansing residents. Do I feel safe in Lansing, just being around Lansing? Because the question was just being here, living here, and working here.
Do you feel comfortable living or working in Lansing?
I do feel comfortable living in Lansing. I think that we have a more safe environment than a lot of cities around the size that we have. I think we can do better. I think there's a lot of work to be done. Community activism is at an all-time high right now. You got a lot of people that want to help that situation. I feel less safe working in Lansing and for Lansing, to be honest with you. And I think there's a lot of people that would agree with that. I'm glad that you guys have opened up this conversation. I think that it needs to happen, but I think there's some internal conversations that should happen before we get to this point. I think that the mayor putting this together and having all of these beautiful Black faces on here that are very highly skilled and qualified to do the work that they're doing is great. But I believe that ultimately we're doing a whole lot of work to make him look better and not to fix the issues. And it's sad to me because I love you, Lori. I don't know Teresa, but I've heard some great things, Kim Coleman, and I'm really sad and literally like almost in tears right now watching that video earlier and knowing everything that I know that this mayor's done and all that we're doing to try to act like that stuff didn't happen. I hurt for the people that I've spoken about repeatedly and their issues that aren't being brought to the table. We should start there before we start talking about this community anyway.
And thank you for that input. Thank you very much for that input, Mr. Lynn.
I'll be on every one of these that you guys allow me to speak.
Absolutely. This is what this is about, community input. So we appreciate your input. Thank you very much. At this time, we don't have any more hands raised for this particular question. So I will go forward with the next question, and please feel free to raise your hand. Regardless whether you work in the city of Lansing, do you believe that the city hires and supports people of color to work at all levels in the city of Lansing, whether that be the mayor's office, the judicial branch, or the city council? Please raise your hand. Or I can start talking. I missed someone. I can start talking for everyone, actually. Pamela Ford, Loretta Stanaway. Stanaway, if I pronounce your name, please correct me. That's all I see hands raised. So please invite in Pamela Ford and Loretta. We want all of your input, so please raise your hand and participate. Good evening, Ms. Ford. You're on mute.
All right, good evening. I don't think that there is diversity amongst the upper levels of the city, practically in any city. I think that that is a citywide problem. And I don't think that Lansing is any different in that area. So my answer to your question is no, I do not.
And can you elaborate more? How do you feel that we can help that situation or help the city move forward to ensure that we do hire people of color and promote them accordingly in places of leadership?
Well, I think, first of all, in the government, I think more of us need to run for office, first of all, and maybe some of us are interested in running, but we don't really know how or what exactly it is to do. Workshops or things like that to kind of help people to learn what to do would be beneficial. And as far as promoting people and putting people in leadership positions, I just think that when you are recruiting for those positions, that an effort needs to be made to reach out to minorities, all minorities, because the more diverse the people who are at the top making those decisions, the better off we will all be.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stanaway.
I would say yes. I think that Lansing has done very well on the whole. There's always room for improvement in anything, anytime, anywhere. But I think overall Lansing has done quite well in bringing in.
Yes? You went on mute, sorry.
Into different positions. I think that your video tonight showed quite a few of the people. And I do know that the police and the fire departments have been making very strong efforts to try and recruit more minorities into those positions. I know it's a struggle for them to find applicants. So if there are specific ways that anyone can recommend that the departments of police and fire in particular can apply in searching for qualified applicants, I think they're open to that. But I know they're making very serious efforts in those regards.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite to the conversation Nadia Fisher. Ms. Fisher, welcome.
Unmute myself. Yeah, so I've lived in Lansing since 2008. I came here for college. I will say, as someone who doesn't know all the inner workings of the city and its officials, I do vote in every election, but sometimes it does feel as if, and it's not to say this is what is occurring, but sometimes it almost feels like a tokenism, where it's almost like, we're able to show that we do have these people of color in these positions, especially high profile ones, and then it almost feels as if like, okay, great, we have that person. But I think that Lansing could maybe do a little bit better of being transparent in their recruiting efforts. And I think it was Pamela earlier who mentioned something that sounds akin to a mentorship program. I don't know if Lansing has something like that, but if you're able to not just recruit ready-made people, but people who have the potential. And I am also a union representative, and I know that we work with employers where we try to figure out like, what are the specific barriers? Is it because like you're only asking for a master's level person? Is it because you're only asking for this and that? Because do we necessarily need a master's level person? Or is there someone that we know that's going for a master's in a field that's similar? Maybe we could expand that master's field and things of that nature. Now, it's not to say those things aren't there, because they could potentially be, but the transparency would be helpful, so then we can point directly to it and say, look, here are the efforts that we're making. It's not necessarily just us saying like, you know, we have a person of color who is in this position and that position. It's demonstrating the effort that's been made, like genuine effort.
Thank you. So basically you're saying we possibly could review position descriptions and see how we can tailor those and look what we're really looking for as an employee and what we may or may not need in those position descriptions.
Yes, and that's what, like I said, I'm a union representative. We've done that with plenty of positions where we feel as if it's either just hard to recruit for, but also like, who are we catering this position to with unconsciously? So those are just, you know, things that we can all think about.
Thank you for your input, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next question. Do you believe that racism is a problem in Lansing? Don't all raise your hand at once. Do you believe that racism is a problem in Lansing? Would anyone like to have input on that? Yes, I would like to invite in Brendan Hamilton, Jennifer Graw, Sarah Anthony, and Dominic Devereaux. We will begin with Brendan Hamilton.
I apologize for not turning my camera on. I am pulling double duty at the moment and in the car. So I want to apologize, but I also want to thank everyone that is on the webinar. If you can hear me, am I okay?
Is it Ms. Devereaux talking?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you?
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So to answer your question, yes, I do believe that there is racism in Lansing. Do I believe that it is overt? No, but I do believe that it's very systematic. And so I'm sure that others who have raised their hands will speak to that. But just to keep it short and simple, I do believe that there is racism existing within the Lansing area, but it is more of a systematic racism than a overt kind of just person-to-person racism.
Thank you very much, Ms. Devereaux. Brendan Hamilton, welcome to the conversation.
My speaker going through?
I can't hear you, Brendan.
Okay, it's not going. Is it working?
Brendan, we have a bad connection with your audio.
Okay. So nothing's going through?
It's still not clear.
Okay. Here, is there a way you can type in?
Okay, so Brendan, what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to the next person. I'll come back to you, okay? Sarah Anthony.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on. Hi, Lori.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I mean, I had to chime in on this question, but I'm listening intently. But absolutely, racism exists in Lansing. It exists across the state, across the country. You know, if it didn't exist, you know, the city of Lansing, the county wouldn't have declared it a public health crisis. But we didn't need those types of formal resolutions to tell us what we already know. The data shows that if you are Black or brown in this community, your quality of life is just different. Your likelihood of being stopped by the police, your likelihood of not graduating from college, your likelihood of not being as healthy, not getting job opportunities, not getting job opportunities past a certain level. It's literally in the air we breathe. It's where we live. It's where we work. It's how far we can advance. And despite some of the titles that we have obtained and how far many of us have come, I think that it is very, very clear that racism is embedded in every single system. And sometimes that's hard for us to swallow because of us who love Lansing, who have lived here, have grown up here, who have gone through the schools here. It's hard for us to imagine, but as Ms. Devereaux mentioned, a lot of it is covert. It's embedded in some of us having implicit bias around, you know, how we treat each other. And I think that this is a good conversation to be having, because if we've declared it a public health crisis at the city and at the county, I think it's not a question of if it exists, it's what we're going to do about it. And I hope that this is a conversation that continues to evolve about what we're going to do to close these gaps for our Black and Brown communities and also low-income communities across the city. So thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Rep. Anthony. Appreciate it. Brendan Hamilton, welcome back.
Is this working?
I can hear you, so I can probably repeat if everyone else can't hear you.
Okay, okay, cool. So, firstly, I've not seen people really be overly racist in Lansing. Really,
I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton.
is it,
I can't hear you, so I don't know that everyone else can hear you.
Okay. Is there a way I can pass or type? Sorry, it must not be out there.
Yeah, I apologize, but I can't hear you at all. So I'm not sure the rest of the audience can hear you. Thank you. Jennifer Groh, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
And I hope I pronounced your name right.
Close enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, racism exists in Lansing. It's hard to follow Representative Anthony. It exists everywhere. We would not be having this conversation if there was an equal playing field. And I don't necessarily think that it's a fault of a particular person, but I think it's the responsibility of all of us to rectify 400 years of inequity slowly, carefully, and accept responsibility to do our part to change ourselves and our systems. Because even if I didn't create it personally, I want to leave the world a better place, and I want my children to grow up in a world in a better place. And I want the contributions of my Black and Brown brothers and sisters to contribute to the world that I get to live in a much more powerful way than they have had.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Royce Jones to the conversation. Hello, Mr. Jones.
Hello. Let me start my video. All right. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
So I do think that racism is an issue, and I don't think that the question should be, is there racism, but, you know, what are we going to do about it? And I think this is part of the solution, but I think there's more that we can do, and that is really engaging with the community, and the community of color specifically, with single mothers in the community, with people who are who have been traumatized by a lot of the issues and challenges that come with being a Black person or a person of color in the community. So again, starting here is great, but I think there's absolutely more that we could do to really impact our community and the people that we serve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. We will have one more response for this question, and we'd like to invite Dulles Coatbridge to the forum. Mr. Coatbridge.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mr. Coatbridge. How are you this evening?
Fine, fine.
Great.
I'm not going to be too long, but I want to pinch this question with the previous question. And,
Okay.
My response comes from actually talking to a number of people who were in leadership positions earlier on the last few years who have since left. We had dialogue with them, and the theme that was consistent among many of the professionals that had leadership roles, and I'm not going to name names, but yeah, I think you could relate on who they are, is that the advice that these individuals have, having extensive experience and knowledge in their area, being circumvented by individuals on the staff who have no experience. And this was the individuals who first came in and are still, some of them are still in the leadership roles or doing business within the city. A lot of their ideas and thoughts and their suggestions were put to the side and not used or thought of, and individuals who had zero experience ideas were put to the tablet and executed. And that would be, I think, the big issue when we're dealing with racism, is not only that, which is very overt, like Sarah was saying, because yes, racism is everywhere. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Yes, Lansing is experiencing the same difficulties as others, maybe not to the same degree. But in this case, when you have individuals who are part of a leadership team that ideas and thoughts are dismissed, bring about some issue as to, is that something that could be a subliminal thought of racism, or maybe just you having a lot of faith in your staff on issues that they really can't handle. And that's all I wanted to add. I got to leave here soon because we got a candidate forum, but I wanted to say that before the forum was done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kopich. Have a wonderful evening. The next question. If you believe that racism is a problem, either of these sectors, arts and culture, education, health and healthcare, housing, jobs and economic development, public safety, and neighborhood communities, what suggestions do you have to change that dynamic in order to achieve equity for all the citizens of Lansing? And I will probably have to repeat that question for everyone. Would anyone like to respond to that? And our wonderful co-facilitator will let you in. Yes, I see that we had 3 hands. Okay. Mr. Mumley, can you please let the 4 individuals in? There are now 5. I cannot see their hands at this time. Any raised hands? Okay. Mr. Lopez, Lorenzo Lopez. Mr. Lopez, are you there with us? Okay, I will go to Mr. Chuck Grisby.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mr. Grisby.
Thank you for having me on the call. Thanks for having this forum available for community members to interact and participate. I'm an East Lansing resident, and I've been here about 4.5 years, but I do a little bit of work in the Lansing area. And I just wanted to speak to your question, if I heard it correctly, in regards to the educational aspect. I volunteered over at North Middle School some time back and really saw a lot of disparity and problematic, systematic problems over there with the educational system and the structure there compared to East Lansing and some of the school systems that I'm in now. And I really think that that's really starts and ends when it comes to being able to kind of really attack some of these complicated issues with racism, discrimination, equity, equality, some of the different things that come into play that affect us as adults lifelong. I really see underfunding. I really see not as qualified administrators and teachers in roles that they're overwhelmed. And I really thought that was a great example of where to start when it comes to really addressing some of the issues that a lot of people were calling in about and really want to fix. And, you know, I have a unique perspective, again, being in East Lansing and coming over to Lansing. So I was really hesitant to call in here and speak because it's not really my home turf. But I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention about really investing more into our educational system, really getting that funding, really getting families and parents to understand that they need to be participatory when it comes to school boards, commissions, and really take ownership on some of the issues that they have there. It's really difficult to really have change if you're not involved and you don't have a seat at the table. And you do have opportunities in some form or fashion, despite systematic racism and discrimination, that you can start somewhere. And I really believe starting with education is a key element. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grisby. And to address what you're saying, really, even though you may be a resident of East Lansing, it's really about the greater Lansing area. So it applies across the system because we may live in East Lansing, but we may work in Lansing. So it goes back and forth. So really what you have is very valuable input. Thank you so much. Yesenia Murillo, please join the conversation.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Yesenia.
Hi, Lori. May you repeat the question just so that I can keep myself in context?
Okay, great. If you believe that racism is a problem in either of these sectors, arts and culture, education, health and healthcare, housing, jobs and economic development, public safety, and neighborhoods, communities, what suggestions do you have to change that dynamic in order to achieve equity for all citizens in Lansing?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My field is health, public health, and although it is my expertise, I would rather say that we have issues around race and racism across all the social determinants of equity that you mentioned. But I'll focus on health, especially now during COVID. I think that we need as a city to make sure that we have accountability structures, that we collect data to make informed decisions that are factual, and that we always ask for community-driven initiatives. And that means asking people how they are, what we should do, and really leveraging their expertise in their experience as citizens, neighbors, and friends in the greater Lansing community. So those are just some aspects that I wanted to lift up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morello. Lorenzo Lopez, are you with us now? He is no longer with us. Lorenzo? Okay, we will go to Nadia Fisher. Hello.
Yeah, just really quickly, I want to address my earlier comment where I mentioned that sometimes things appear to be tokenisms. I want to be very clear that I support all my people of color in their positions. I think that they worked extremely hard to get where they are now. So I want to be very clear that I do not in any way think that you're disappointed there because of your skin color, because I think we all know that is highly unlikely. But in general, in terms of this question, I do think that like access is a big issue with even just learning the information of things that you're entitled to or things that can assist you. I'm a social worker. I have worked with people to apply for things like Medicaid, food assistance, things of that nature that they had no idea that they were entitled to and that they qualified for, even how to get it. So we talk about kind of like the systemic issues in the healthcare systems and in education that people face, but that's once you're even in the system. If you're not aware that you qualify for Healthy Michigan and you don't have to go to the ER every time you have an issue, that's a problem. I actually think things like these Zoom meetings that we're doing, mostly because of COVID, these actually would help a lot with access. I mean, not everyone has internet in their homes, but enough people do where it's like, yeah, maybe it's difficult for me to go to this in-person meeting. I don't know what to do with my kids. I have work, so on and so forth. But if you can do this right at home or from like your break room at work, things like that would even just be helpful for someone to come in and passively learn information about what's going on in Lansing, what you can qualify for. Just from my experience, upper income people and white Americans do tend to at least know what they're entitled to. And if they don't know, they have a network that will help them know. And I think that is something that we tend to miss out on when you're talking about Black and brown people, or even like low income people in general.
Thank you. And I agree with that because I do work in healthcare. So I think it's very important when it comes to systemic racism that we have to address the barriers that people of color face when dealing with healthcare. Their mistrust of healthcare systems and access is very important. So I know with my organization, Sparrow Health System, of course, that we try to do that outreach to make sure that everyone has that access. But even though that they have opportunities as far as jobs, volunteerism, and then I take it upon myself to really work with the Lansing School District to make sure that all children have exposure where they're aware of healthcare field careers. So I think it's important to do that outreach, especially as a health organization.
And I will say, I think like that's really good when you go straight to the school with the children. And I know that like every business has some kind of outreach, but even stuff like mailings. Like I remember maybe it was last year where like whoever's in charge of recycling sent out all those flyers to everyone saying like, please stop recycling paper or plastic bags. This is how you recycle. Even something passive like that, like, hey, you may qualify for Medicaid. You may qualify for childcare assistance through the state. That way people aren't kind of dependent on their networks or whatever to help educate them.
Right. So really it's building awareness in the community. Whatever way we have to do that, we have to figure out how we reach everyone in the community.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
Mr. Michael Lynn. Mr. Lynn, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good. Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you.
So I don't know who's moderating this or not, but I've been asked, I've tried to get on both the last questions, and after I answered the first one, nobody came to me. My hand was raised the entire time. I had to contact Sarah Anthony to have her text you in order for me to get on.
Okay.
They got on.
Mr. Lynn, this is a community forum. So we want to give everyone the opportunity to respond. So we just don't want to focus on one person. We have over 100 people on this call. So we really want the input of everyone. So we're just trying to be fair to do that. So no one is ignoring you.
No, Lori, the only problem was that every time you kept saying that nobody was raising their hand, and my hand was raised. So I was just like, how is this happening this way? But I'm not going to argue. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate you for coming to me. But I will answer those two questions I was not able to get to. We talked about racism within departments and so on and so forth, that there's an issue with Black. Go ahead.
Well, we're focused on this question. If you believe that there's racism is a problem in either of these sections, what are your suggestions to change that dynamic in order to achieve equity for all citizens in Lansing?
If I was going to change sexual assaults happen in gymnastics, people in MSU, I'd get rid of Larry Nassar. So therefore, I'd get rid of Andy Shore, because he's the biggest problems that you have right now in the city of Lansing. We didn't have these problems 3 years ago.
Okay, Mr. Lynn, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Have a wonderful evening.
So now,
yes. And I'm going to try Lorenzo one more time. Are you there? If not, I will move on to our final question related to Lansing engagement. In your view, does your workplace effectively address reported issues of racism? In your view, does your workplace effectively address reported issues of racism? Angela Matthews. Please join the conversation.
Sorry about that, Miss Lori. Hi.
Hello, Ms. Matthews. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, ma'am. I would say I've been fortunate to have, to be self-employed for a number of years. However, I'll speak to when I was employed, I would say no, that the organization that I work for did not. As a matter of fact, if someone reported something, it was basically, what can I say? It was not truly investigated. And when it was done not from the fairness, but just kind of to just get it done, to say that, oh, we investigated a matter because the decision had already been made, depending on whomever the person was accused of it and what their relationship with leadership was.
Exactly.
So that's my answer to that question. Thank you so much.
And I agree with that, Ms. Matthews, because I think we have that every organization has the opportunity for improvement when it comes to dealing with racism, what policies they have in place, and really training our leaders to be accountable. And if you do have a workforce, if someone comes to you with a complaint, you know, it has to be taken seriously and not dismissed. I think a lot of organizations miss that step because perhaps their leaders aren't have the tools or the skill sets to address those hard conversations or even to deal with racism. Because I know with the last social unrest that, you know, that conversation goes, well, how do we talk about this? So I think organizations in our community, they really have to learn to have those crucial conversations with their employees and be genuine about it. You don't want to approach a situation just so you can say, I handled the situation. You want to be strategic, intentional, and genuine. So I thank everyone for participating in this portion of the program. That concludes our questions related to Lansing's environment. I'd like to thank all the participants. Now I'd like to invite Chief Green to the conversation. Chief Green, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Good evening, Chief Green. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Great, wonderful. Welcome to the conversation. Chief Green, I will ask the audience to respond to questions related to the police department, and then you will have the opportunity to respond. Are you good with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Oh, wonderful. So let's begin. The first question, do you feel that racism is a problem in the Lansing Police Department? And if yes, please describe how. We have, please welcome Sherry Skinner.
Hello?
Yes, Ms. Skinner, welcome.
So I guess I don't want to use the term racism per se, but I would like to maybe ask the question of, does the city of Lansing feel that they have dirty cops? If Chief Daryl Green could comment to that.
Well, you're on mute. Chief Green?
Sure. So I think the question was, does Chief Green feel that the Lansing Police Department has dirty cops?
Well, I think based
because you are the head. I'm just saying, as a Lansing citizen of 21 years, I've experienced a few things, and I know of people who have experienced a few things, and it doesn't matter the color of skin, but it happened to feel like if it benefited the officer, they took advantage of it to their advantage. So that's kind of what I mean about dirty cops.
Right, but the question, ma'am.
I feel there is an issue with that here.
Right, but ma'am, the question was, do you feel that racism is a problem in the Lansing Police Department?
Well,
So
I'm trying to say that I don't want to use the word racism because I feel that People, no matter what color, have been taken advantage by people in authority in regards to the LPD. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Skinner.
Yep.
Could you please invite Tanisha Terry to the conversation? Ms. Terry.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi there.
Hi.
I do believe that discrimination does exist within the department. I've seen it at very minor levels, but yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. And you said you witnessed it yourself personally?
Yes.
And could you just elaborate, or do you mind sharing in what way or what you may have seen?
I myself am multiracial. According to what your eyes will see, I'm very African American. When there was a situation where I was involved and there was an Asian man involved, and for some reason I became the center of the problem, and that wasn't the true nature of it. And it's because in the eyes of the officer they saw, oh, it's an African American woman in Lansing. Mind you, I only lived there maybe 4 months. I'm from the East Lansing Okemos area. I had moved there.
So were you able to address that issue once you felt discriminated against, or did you feel that you had some avenue to go towards to make a complaint or grievance?
I felt like I could not complain because I didn't know what would happen. I just personally sent an email today that was supposed to reach Chief Green to talk about the 2 instances that I would like to refer to in detail, because one of them involved an officer stating that they didn't want to do something that they shouldn't have been doing in the first place so they could get back to a Coke deal.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with me, and I'm sure that the police department will follow up with your email. I appreciate that input.
And Lori, if I could respond.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things is this, is that, as the police chief, I understand totally and empathize with some of the comments that people are making in reference to their perceptions and experiences about racism. And I understand as a police chief that as a department, we must ensure equal and just treatment for all persons. We must provide consistent training. We provide training on impartial policing, anti-discrimination principles, and cultural literacy. And we've also had humane policing taught recently by Dr. Freya Rivers, formerly of Sankofa Shule. Even with all of those mechanisms in place, I firmly believe that racism exists in every organization, and it's the duty and the responsibility of the supervisors, the chief, that CEO of that particular department and organization to put systems in place to mitigate systemic racism. I speak from my own personal experience. I know systemic racism exists. I've experienced that and overt racism and covert racism throughout my career here at the Lansing Police Department. And I will say this, that, it's an opportunity for us to continue to evolve, to continue to monitor and hold people accountable, to continue to facilitate the best strategies and trainings to mitigate these issues. And for Ms. Terry, I didn't get your complaint. I don't know what email you sent, but we certainly have a internal affairs complaint system. And we also have a complaint investigator that's outside of the police department, of which we can direct you to if you feel that you will not get the investigation needed inside the police department. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your commentary, Ms. Terry and Chief Green. The next question, how well do you trust Lansing Police Department officers' use of appropriate force when encountering resistance? I see that we I have 3 hands. Nami of Lansing, please welcome to the conversation. Nami or Nami, I apologize. Tanya Pratt, please join the conversation. I'll start with Nami or Nami Lansing.
Nami Lansing.
Nami Lansing.
Yes.
Welcome.
My name is Kevin Keeler. I'm the president of NAMI Lansing. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And we have a relationship with law enforcement in the Tri-County area called the Crisis Intervention Team and Crisis Intervention Training. And we have trained over 280 officers, but it relates to how they interact with people that have mental illnesses. But a lot of the same techniques and everything just are good, effective police work too, of trying to de-escalate situations when they come upon them and try not to use force. So I haven't met every single law enforcement person in the Lansing area, but I've met many of them, and I've met much of the leadership too. And I know that at least they are making an effort to move in that direction. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. But I do know that at least when it comes to dealing with people who have mental illnesses, that they are really attempting to try to work on de-escalation and working effective methods to be able to make their interaction with people less violent and more helpful to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that input. Would you like to respond, Chief Green? And you're muted.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So first of all, thank you very much, Kevin, for your commentary. Much appreciated. And I'm also on the Crisis Intervention Team board with NAMI Lansing as well. It's great work. Largely, it is de-escalation that is taught primarily to use the best strategy when dealing with people with mental health issues. And I think one of the things that I'm proud of, particularly of the Lansing Police Department, is that we have taken a host of voluntary, meaningful reforms, and I've seen those reforms continue to exist throughout my career. We were the first department in the area to outfit officers with patrol and body-worn cameras. We've, again, embraced crisis intervention, de-escalation training, implicit bias training. We incorporated the Obama administration's 21st Century Policing Task Force principles. We've updated our policies to include the duty to intervene and chokeholds, prohibit shooting at moving vehicles. We've been collecting our racial profiling data since 2001. No department in this area has done that. And also an example really close to crisis intervention is the fact that we were the first in the state as a department to have a fully embedded police social worker. And there's many other historical and voluntary reforms. I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to talk about some of the changes we recently did. But I think there's definitely a great opportunity for us to continue that relationship with NAMI Lansing and the Tri-County Crisis Intervention team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Green. And you kind of gave a response to the next question, but I do want the community to be able to weigh in as well. So the next question is, what training practices should Lansing police officers be required to attend? I apologize. I truly apologize. We have Ms. Tanya Pratt on the line. Welcome, Ms. Pratt.
Good evening.
I apologize.
No problem. Thank you for acknowledging me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat the question for me again, please?
Yes. How well do you trust Lansing Police Department officers' use of appropriate force when encountering resistance?
I can speak to the fact that I don't want to just single out the Lansing Police Department. I think I just have an inherent fear across the board with police in general because of the inherent and implicit biases we all bring to whatever career choice we make or whatever job we do. that impacts how we view the world and how we see the world. My fear when I see a police car behind me, I instantaneously freeze just because of the color of my skin, being an African American woman, not sure how I'm going to be perceived by those police officers in the car behind me. So I think to a certain degree, yes, it exists. It exists in all police departments. What I was grateful to hear from Chief Green was acknowledging and recognizing that there has to be some type of ongoing training, some type of ongoing learning process put in place for those police officers as they go out throughout their career, engaging and interact with the community. Unless something like that is in place, I think you're going to continue to have the systemic issues that we have and the fear from the community because of the implicit and inherent biases we all carry to one degree or another.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt. Chief Green, do you have a response to that?
Do. First of all, thank you very much, Ms. Pratt. I definitely appreciate your comments as well. And one of the things I took out of that specifically, not just the ongoing training for police officers, but I think the Lansing Police Department can do a better job of ongoing training and transparency to its community. I think there's a lot of times that myself as a police chief, I'm communicating what the Lansing Police Department is currently doing because people don't really understand some of our reforms, some of the great things that we've done. And so I think increasing the communication between the police department is a viable concern for me, and it's an opportunity for us to get to know our communities and our communities to get to know us better. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to invite to the conversation Kyle Kaminsky and Michael Cole. Mr. Kaminsky. Mr. Kaminsky? Well, we'll wait for a moment and go to Mr. Cole. Michael Cole, would you like to join the conversation?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. You know, as I was listening to the conversation here, it crossed my mind, and I mean, you know, this is probably not the question. I was kind of waiting. I think I accidentally raised my hand, but since I'm here, I'll say this. My biggest concern is that how does the police department gain the trust of the community? It's been a big fracture over time, and I know they've trained, they've done a lot of things to improve themselves and whatnot, but we still not have gotten that trust back between the community and police. How do we do that? Now, I understand there's responsibility on both sides. The community is going to have to be able to reach out when the hand is reached out, to reach their hand out also, but we're going to have to someplace start to rebuild that trust. Otherwise, none of this is going to ever work. You know, everybody's got their prejudices, their biases and whatnot. I hear the word racism a lot. And as a Black man, I can tell you, until just a few days ago, I didn't really understand what racism was all about. I thought I did, I had experienced it, but I didn't know what it was all about. Racism is something that is a part of a system, it's a part of our laws. I think we have to go and dismantle our laws and look through them and just see what in this law allows a person to be racist, okay? I mean, you know, it's just wrapped into our culture. It's ingrained. So some people, like police officers, are doing their job, and they don't understand that. And I had the opportunity, and Chief Green, you just said something about training the community. I had the opportunity to go out to one of the training facilities for MSU police, and I had a chance to do the, you know, the little thing when you role play and, you know, they give you a gun and they do the thing on the screen. And I was like, wow, standing on that side of the fence and seeing what they have to deal with in a split second's notice. It's something. It wakes you up and lets you see that, hey, there's a serious side on both sides. But as a Black man, I've also experienced policemen being disrespectful and treating me less than a man. Okay. And I think that, that right there in itself, hey, treat me as a human being, treat me as a person. Don't just assume just because I'm a black male that I'm gonna, hurt you or harm you, whatever. Approach the situation differently. Have some perspective. And if I do go off on you, if I do get belligerent, don't let that draw you into to doing something that is not necessarily legal or not necessarily, policy driven. Okay. So like I said, we got to start with trust. And
Thank
how
you,
do we
Mr.
go
Cole.
back and build that trust?
Thank you very much for that input. Would you like to respond, Chief Green?
I think he's definitely correct in his assessment. The only thing about building that trust is an ongoing process, and you'll have some peaks and some ebbs and flows. There'll be times where there are difficult times that we have to have difficult conversations when the trust and the legitimacy that we work so hard to deal with are affected by a video that happens thousands of miles away. So I think, we're in the social media realm of policing, and we're judged maybe sometimes unfairly by situations that happen in other states and other parts of the country. I think that for the police department, we do a good job. We have 12 community police officers. We go to well over 300 community policing events every year. We work with our teenagers. We taught over 650 students gang resistance education and training, social skill development. We're doing a lot of those things. And we also have a citizen police academy. COVID-19 has affected the most recent class that was in class during March. But there's a lot of opportunities that we can continue to move forward to develop that trust. But again, I call it putting money into the well for a rainy day. And, it's an ongoing process. It's fluid, it's dynamic in building trust and legitimacy. One day you have it and one day it's at an all-time low, depending on what happened throughout the country. So you're absolutely right. But this is an opportunity to have this critical dialogue between us to make sure that we build a firm system of trust that, can endear, those really bad times when, an incident or something provocative happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Cal Kaminsky, welcome to the conversation. Can you hear us? Hello? Okay, I think Kyle is on mute. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I'm
That's
not
okay.
Kyle Kaminsky,
That's
and
the name.
I don't know why I'm described as such on screen. My name is Jill Chenault.
Very nice to meet you, Jill.
Nice to meet you too. I have a couple of questions and one statement that I'd like to direct to Chief Green, if I may. My first question is whether there is a residency requirement of Lansing police officers. And that's pretty much a yes or no question. And I'm also wondering if the police athletic league still exists. And if so, the extent to which he feels that the resources dedicated to that league are sufficient. The statement that I would like to make is in response to the question that was originally posed, Ms. Simon.
Mm-hmm.
No, I do not trust LPD to not use excessive force if they encounter resistance. And my answer is based on my encounters with the police. I've only lived in Lansing for a short period of time, about just over 3 years. And I moved here from New York. Their police department is a gang. So I had minimal expectations in terms of the Lansing Police Department being similar to New York's. I certainly did not expect that. But of the few encounters that I have had with the police, I have been spoken to so rudely and with such disrespect and disregard that I certainly would not have trust in the officers, most of them, certainly the ones that I've encountered, to behave in a humane or even reasonable way if they encountered any resistance. In one instance, I saw several police officers detaining 3 young Black men. And this was just after the protests began, shortly after George Floyd's murder. And I stopped to observe, simply to observe. And the officers, one in particular, repeatedly asked me why I was there and repeatedly said that I was not helping and that I should leave. One of the young men requested that a supervisor be present, and when a sergeant arrived, a Black sergeant, younger than me, with minimal home training apparently, he asked me the same types of questions. Why are you here? Do you know them? And when I said, I just want to make sure that they're treated fairly and that no one gets shot, and he laughed and said, well, why would you expect that? At that time, not only was his answer tone deaf, it was disrespectful, because at that time, I think that emotions were even higher then than they are now. That officer and the other officer also kept stating what they believed the young man that was in cuffs to have done. And they stated it as if it were fact. And when I tried to point out that unless they had seen the incident firsthand, they were simply repeating what was told to them by dispatch. And when they disagreed with that, the sergeant, the Black sergeant, younger than me, called me ignorant and walked away. And then when he was among a little group of the other officers, all of whom were white, he repeated that I was ignorant. So no, I have no trust in the police department to handle situations appropriately, because that was a fairly innocuous situation and it was not handled appropriately with regards to me. Eventually, I believe it was handled appropriately with regard to the young man that had been detained.
Okay.
But I had nothing to do with the incident, yet I was being spoken to as if I was a problem simply by being present and trying to tell the young man to calm down and stop yelling at them and stop trying to walk away from them, because I was concerned that he would be hurt. But my questions really are, does PAL exist? If so, what state is it in? Is it being funded well? And if there is a residency requirement, because in my experience, it's very difficult to brutalize people that are your neighbors or that you live nearby.
Well, thank you, Ms. Chenault, and I'll give an opportunity for Mr. Green to reply. Chief Green. You're on mute.
I don't know why I keep doing that. So first of all, I sincerely apologize for the incident that occurred and what happened to you. And I'm definitely sorry about that. And feel free to contact our office and we'll definitely look further into that. And I want to say this, that as far as your questions, it is there is no residency requirement. It's actually a state law that does not, will not allow a residency requirement to work as a police officer in a particular municipality. So that's a state law that doesn't allow that. And as far as the Police Athletic League, we are not properly funded regarding the Police Athletic League. In actuality, we had to start the Police Athletic League as a nonprofit to be able to accept some donations, and donations have been very low. I do think there is a void, particularly for youth activities, and I have communicated to a couple community members, because anything I can do to further some positive community activities for our youth, I will definitely support. And again, sorry for what happened to you, and please contact my office and we can look further into that. Thank you very much.
And I will take one more community member, Loretta Stanaway. Will you please join the conversation?
Hello.
Hi,
I'm
Ms.
back.
Stanaway.
Hi. I would say that my experience is twofold. One is I went on a ride along some time ago with police on an evening shift on a weekend. And there were only 2 calls that we responded to, but both of them were opportunities that could have gone awry, and neither of them did. One was the police officers responding with sincere compassion and sensitivity to a young woman who was having a mental health crisis. And the other was a very confusing and multifaceted assault that had taken place with more than 4 participants using different weapons and attacking different people. And all of the participants were either drunk or under the influence of drugs. So there was a lot of opportunity there for something to have gone sideways, but all of the involved officers responded appropriately and with a real depth of training, I felt, that recognized all the possible outcomes and worked to minimize any kind of anything that would have accelerated or aggravated the circumstances. Also, because I listen to the scanner a lot, I hear things often, and I can tell you from my experience over years, literally years of listening to the scanner, I have heard numerous times where the police have worked diligently to de-escalate successfully situations that could have gone very badly. I've heard many, many times when, for instance, somebody was involved in a weapons complaint and maybe they were drunk and they had attacked somebody and they had a knife or a gun. And the police will go and surround the house. They'll bring in the START team. They'll bring in the long range audio thing. And they will eventually get to the point where that person who is inside the house and is the threat is either de-escalated or falls asleep, and then they leave. They just walk away. They leave them to sort things out themselves in the morning when they wake up, hopefully sober. So I can say from those experiences that I think the police department does a very good job of not responding forcefully or inappropriately when they have many opportunities to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Stanaway. Any comment, Chief Green?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. So I want to be clear and echo some of the great comments Ms. Stanaway made. The men and women of the Lansing Police Department, they do an outstanding job protecting and serving the city of Lansing. These officers and civilians, they put in some very long hours, engaging some serious, complex and dangerous situations, all while doing that under the microscope of the community and the nation. And so I say this, that, you know, the Lansing Police Department does not do a good job of telling the good stories that it does. A lot of times we look at it as routine when we can escalate a person and get them to refer them to some type of crisis services for help. And I think we just don't do a great job. And our media doesn't cover those stories as well. They don't do a good job. And I'll say that forcefully. But yet, when we do make mistakes, because we are imperfect, just like every organization in this country, when we do make a mistake or engage in something that is provocative, then the media grabs the story and it is engaged on social media platforms. But I think we can do a better job of communicating that. And one of the themes that I'm getting throughout this is that as a department, we haven't connected and communicated and been as transparent as we should with community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. What training practices should Lansing police officers be required to attend? And we kind of touched on that earlier, but we want the community input on that. So if you'd like to speak on that, please raise your hand. Speak to that. So we have Bill Board, please come into the conversation. Royce Jones. Mr. Board. Hello? Perhaps he's not ready at this time. We'll go to Mr. Jones. Royce Jones, welcome to the conversation. What training do you think the Lansing police officers should be required to attend?
First of all, thank you for having me on. And Chief, thank you for your service. I too served in the military, specifically the Navy. So thank you for that. So I would say cultural competence is one of the big challenges. And then I would say in addition to that, how would we make becoming a police officer more attractive? Because that's one thing. If you look at statistics, less than 5% are people of color.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we like remove the stigma when it comes to becoming a police officer, and also educate those who are in that sector and becoming more culturally competent? Because I know this is not something that is going to, this is a long-term effort. So they're not going to be competent in a year or 2 years. This is something that they would have to develop over the course of time. So what type of programs do they have ongoing that's going to help them become culturally competent to the areas in which they serve?
Great. And so would you have any suggestions for how to, you mentioned about hiring or recruiting. Do you have any ideas to recruit officers of color, or any plans in that area to do so?
I would say definitely schools, talking to the students, and I would say even developing some type of mentorship program with the students, targeting students who may want to become a police officer, but again, they have that negative stigma about what a police officer entails. So maybe mentoring them over the course of the years up until college, and then maybe, I mean, you'd have someone for life right there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Chief Green?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for your service as well, and great comments. I'll start off a little bit about the difficulty in recruiting officers of color. Extremely difficult. And we have tried some of the suggestions you're bringing up right now. We have a public safety academy that goes on once a year. It is specifically geared towards teenagers to get them active and engaged in public safety, not just police, but fire as well. And Mike Lynn, he's participated in that as well. He just spoke. So that's a marvelous opportunity. We also have the Police Explorer Program. And the Police Explorer Program is nationally acclaimed. Right here in Lansing, it's nationally acclaimed for the recruiting efforts that come out of that institution. And that Police Explorer programs, they can be from ages 13 to 21. So we're having an opportunity to engage with them early on. We bring them in, we fit them with uniforms. They assist at some of the major events. They go on ride-alongs. They go to an academy every year over in Fort Custer, excuse me. And so it's an amazing opportunity. And we also have our great team, which is our gang resistance education and training team. It's in the high schools and middle school. And we try to reach kids in their prime ages, that 6th grade all the way up to 8th grade. And we try to interact with them, and we do a 13-week program. We bring in a police officer in a soft uniform, and they engage them for 13 weeks and develop some really great relationships. And a year and a half ago, we successfully had our first great student that was taught by one of our great members become a police officer. And she's from Lansing. And just developing those relationships early on are very critical. And we also try to interact with our athletes, our high school athletes, our college athletes. We have a number of officers that are former football players over at Michigan State University. But you also bring up a vital point, cultural competency, because the young lady mentioned specifically about officers not living in the Lansing area. We have some officers that live 40 miles away or more. And, I firmly believe if you live in the area that you police or in the general vicinity, you're going to treat people differently, because you're going to see those people at the movie theater, in the grocery store. And so you're going to treat people differently. That's just my own anecdotal, opinion on that. But great points, Mr. Jones. And, you know, we will work with anybody that has a viable candidate, and especially in the current culture, current environment as far as policing. I just recently lost 2 really good candidates as a result of just, you know, media attention about, you know, defunding the police. I just lost, you know, 2 really good candidates, and, you know, I was really saddened about that. So I know moving forward that it's going to be even tougher to engage with African Americans. And, you know, obviously I'm an African American as well, and it has been definitely difficult being on both sides, and it's challenging. And we do have some mentor programs once a person starts here at the police department. I've mentored 4 or 5 different officers regularly that are going through similar instances of dealing with community members and family members, and on a new police department, trying to understand this culture. And so cultural competency is a viable, but again, it has to be ongoing. It's got to be regular. It can't just be once a year. It's got to be regular. So thank you very much.
Thank both of you. Mr. Billboard, are you here now? Then I'd like to invite Lanias Gilmore, Lanias or Lanias Gilmore. Please correct me if I pronounce your name wrong. Hello.
Hi, thank you. I apologize for the delay trying to get my technology together.
That's okay. How do you pronounce your first name?
Lanias.
Lanias. Miss Gilmore, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. It's good to see you, Lori.
It's great to see you as well. The question was, if you need a repeat, what training do you think that police officers should be required to attend?
I'm going to answer it this way.
Okay.
What we really need is accountability from the force or forces that are ostensibly charged with protecting our safety, protecting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to just lower the protection of property to the bottom of that list. We really need the accountability. It doesn't matter how much anti-bias training, implicit bias training, even training toward becoming anti-racist or quote unquote cultural competency happens, if we can't depend on an objective and thorough review of every use of force, if we cannot depend on being able to at least become confident about the way that police forces use deadly force very specifically. Until then, all the rest of this is really just becomes a panacea. And it's not the fault of this individual forum or any particular forum. It's just become really a habit in that we lean upon training as our panacea, when in reality, it really has become, it's kind of gotten us away from the point. When we're asking for a resolution to systemic racism, we're asking for repair and we're asking for healing. We are not, and it's not a charitable request, we are demanding to be treated, as some of my other neighbors mentioned, we're demanding to be treated like the human beings that we are, and maybe more importantly, the citizens that we are, and we're demanding the benefits of society that are due to all of us. That's what we're demanding. So I get concerned when we overemphasize training without accountability, because it does begin to sound like a charitable enterprise. It does start to sound very watered down. And even as I was reading today, I was glad to see that quote unquote no-knock warrants will no longer be carried out. Forgive me, I skimmed it, I confess, so I don't know exactly whether this is going to affect tomorrow or next year. I'm glad to see it, but what I didn't see is how the police forces will be accountable to us as citizens as linked to that particular policy. What I want to know is what's going to happen to a police force that does it anyway. I want to know what's going to happen if somebody kicks the door in and I as a citizen feel that, and I as a citizen do not get to see a warrant. To me, that's going to be a no-knock. I want to know what's going to happen after I report that. I want to have some assurance. And that all goes back to the building of trust that people keep talking about. Accountability is the only avenue to that. Training is not going to do it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gilmore. Chief Green?
First of all, thank you very much for your question. And there were a lot of different issues can really come out of that question. And I'll say this, that accountability and oversight are key components, or should be key components, of any police department. And I know you were kind of talking in some general terms. And some of the systems we have in place here at the Lansing Police Department, I mentioned earlier about body-worn cameras. That's not the all, the be-all, just because an officer is wearing a body-worn camera, but it's certainly one of the systems in place that can hold officers accountable. There's also mandatory use of force reporting. We also have a complaint system that provides for early warning intervention system. Internally, we monitor and audit officers based on what type of complaints they're getting, how many uses of force, how regular are their use of force issues, and particular as you bring up deadly force. And I think that one of the things that are being talked about now, particularly in reformist movements, is for the Lansing Police Department, we have a policy called critical incidents. Whereas if an officer is involved in a shooting or someone is seriously injured, any type of incident like that, where someone is seriously hurt, the first thing we do is we lean on our partnerships with the Michigan State Police. They conduct our outside investigation. We want to take ourselves out of the investigation, so we can't be held responsible for any type of bias that could come as a result of our investigators doing the investigation. So we lean on the Michigan State Police to do that. And so our prosecutor, I see her on the phone as well. She has a piece in that, because after the Michigan State Police reaches their conclusion, they further take that report over to the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutor's office can look at it or refer it to another prosecutor's office, or refer it to now there's a motion that possibly the Attorney General office will be reviewing some of these serious injuries, particularly shootings that result in a fatal wound. And so those are some of the things that we can do. But again, the evolution of what's best practice, I think we're at a best practice right now, but as we go through this process, maybe something better will come out. So I'm listening, and I definitely appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take two more audience members, Gwen Coney and Sherry Skinner. Please join the conversation. Good evening, Ms. Coney. Well, we'll move to Sherry Skinner. Ms. Skinner, welcome. They had their hands raised.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, Ms. Coney, welcome to the conversation.
Okay. Knowing Chief Green and his service with Lansing Housing Commission as part of the community policing program that was going on there, that was staffed before, I guess my first question would be if he has the staff and he has the budget to revisit that idea of community policing. I think that with the community policing, for people to see the police in their community before something happens in their community furthers a relationship with the police. And I know that Chief Green and the other officer that we had out there at Lansing Housing Commission really made a difference for the young, do I say people of color, or can I say Black children out there? Because they saw men in that position who were aware of the circumstances and could understand, and I guess that's cultural competency, the position that they were in. Number one, a lot of the trouble, I would say, connects with socioeconomics. And right now, I think if there were more men or women that represented the community in policing in a more positive way, in a proactive versus a responsive way, would kind of get us, to an area of recruiting people of color. And maybe an incentive would be that maybe in the budget, there could be some money or partnership developed with LCC that when there is a person of color, teen or high school student, identified as wanting to go into policing, that they would be able to receive some assistance. And Chief Green, once again, I think you're doing a very great job. And I do believe that as long as you guys keep the channels of communication and information such as this open, I think that Lansing can get to where they want to be and need to be when it comes to diversity. That's all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coney. Chief Green.
First of all, thank you very much, Ms. Coney. Definitely, you were a vital part of, our success out in Leroy Fro, and I definitely appreciate your efforts, continued efforts in the city of Lansing. So thank you very much. One thing I'll say, particularly about community policing, particularly with the Lansing housing, there were a number of resources available for the Lansing Housing Commission, whereas officers like myself were able to really engage with the youth, take them on trips, take family members on trips, build some long-lasting relationships. I still have a lot of relationships from Leroy Fro, that really great people. And so that's missing right now, as far as I know. I know there was monies available from the Lansing Housing Commission that really supplemented what we do. We did years ago, and we also had a boxing league out there. Joe Bermudez was out there from, he was connected with the Police Athletic League, boxing, and the young lady mentioned that earlier about the Police Athletic League. And so there were a number of opportunities that we were really able to nurture our relationship and model some good behaviors as far as police interaction with our community members during that time. So thank you very much. And I think the idea of incentivizing recruiting is a really good idea. And, I think particularly one of the hurdles that people of color often have is they don't have the money to go to the police academy. It's literally over $12,000, $13,000. I don't know what the exact price is now, but that's a big ticket item for a lot of people, and a lot of people are already coming into policing after they have student loans from previous years of college. So great point, and I would love to see that flourish in our city. So thank you very much, Ms. Coney.
Thank you. Ms. Skinner, Sherry Skinner, are you present?
I am.
Wonderful. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I just would like to reiterate, I totally agree with a lot of the things that Ms. Gilmore stated, her comments, her questions, a lot of the same views that I have. And I really can't say much more, but I do want to say, as far as my heritage, I am an elder Native American woman. I really sometimes struggle with the cultural items that we talk about today. I just view us all as people, And sometimes the whole black and white thing is something that I really struggle with. But I'm, you know, I've been a community member for 21 years, and I love the place that I live, and I just, hence my reason for signing up to listen.
Thank you. We appreciate that input, Mrs. Skinner.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful evening. And our last and final question. Would you like to, I'll go on, this is our last and final question for the police department. And that is, do you agree or disagree with the statement, having a well-funded police force improves the city's quality of life? So, we will, okay. So we will bring in Pamela Ford, Gwen Coney, Tanisha Terry, and Michael Cole.
Okay, so the question was, does having a well-funded police department improve the quality?
The city's quality of life.
Okay, so to me, the answer is not necessarily.
Okay.
It depends on how those funds are used. And I agree with the lady who spoke about accountability, because all the training in the world is not going to change a racist or a mean-spirited heart. It's just not going to do it. So the repercussions have to be severe enough that you will change the way you behave, at least at work, okay? And I think that a well-funded police department should invest in community relations, okay? So I'm getting ready to age myself right now, but when I was coming up, we had police officers who patrolled in our area of town, and it was the same one. And we knew them. We knew them by name. My mom would talk to one of them all the time, and he was a white guy. We had 2 black guys and 1 white guy that patrolled, I guess you would say, our neighborhood. And everybody knew them. And so, and we had some racist cops on the police force, as well. But the ones in our neighborhood, we knew them, and we did not fear them, and we respected them. And I think that if we had a situation, Chief Green talked about how when something happens, many states away, and we all react to it. But if we knew our police officers, when we would see that kind of stuff, we would say, well, I'm glad that don't happen here in Lansing, instead of automatically assuming that it would. So a well-funded police department, I think, should invest in community interaction. Because again, if they know us, they'll treat us more respectful. And if we know them, we won't be afraid of them, and we won't always be having our guard up, and we will treat them more respectful if we know them. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Gwen Coney. Gwen, are you present? Tanisha Terry?
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yes, I can.
I don't know what's going on. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. But I agree wholeheartedly with the previous comment. But I get kind of confused because they're using defunding, okay? Different people are attributing, assigning different definitions of defunding. In this form, what are we using as defunding? Are we using it to say that we want to take away part of their budget and maybe put the other part in community policing? Or are we going on some of the other conversations that I've heard outside of this forum where they just want to get rid of the police?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think defunding means getting rid of the police. I think it's really reallocating funds to community resources.
Okay, great.
But I may be wrong.
No, but I'm saying it's been ambiguous. In other areas, they got a definition for it, but I just wanted to know which one are we using here before I make my comment.
Right.
So if we're going by that, I'm all for the maybe finding a balance between community efforts and just straight out policing efforts. I agree with her when she says that the more that you know about the officer and the officer knows about you, the better the relationships are. So maybe there's an opportunity there for some community events to bring the officers out. I know that you just can't dedicate police to community outreach because of the crime thing, but maybe just as much effort in that could be made into a community outreach, get to know the police and things like that. But on the other hand, excuse me, on the other hand, I do feel that Lansing does a good job, but they could do better. And maybe if we could find, like I said, a balance between community policing and then the mental health part that's been added to it, and then the regular policing, that maybe we could get somewhere. And then just one final point is she mentioned also about bad-hearted people. There are bad-hearted people. I'm of the opinion that now that we see that a lot of these policemen who have been in the news lately have some mental issues, is there any mental testing of police officers when they're being considered for employment?
Ms. Coney, I don't mean to interrupt you, but those are very valid points. I want to be very respectful of everyone's time on this in this session, so we won't be able to get to the next two participants. But if you do have additional questions, of course, you can email the address that was given earlier, and that information will be provided at the end of the session. But I do want to give Chief Green the opportunity not only to address the previous speakers, but also have a closing statement. Chief Green.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think the last two comments were very, very well stated. Thank you very much. And I'll make the point of this is that community policing, it's very expensive. We have 12 community police officers throughout the city, the north and the south part of the city. I would love to see another 15 or so community police officers. However, we have a call response of about 84,000 calls that happen on a yearly basis. So officers are going to responding calls 300 times on a daily basis. So that's a lot of calls for the number of officers we had. So when I started in 1997, we had over 260 officers. And I have just looked at a chart and it shows a decline, and now we're at 206, and actually as of today, we're at 196. So that's a significant reduction in officers. And the national average of officers per 1,000 residents is 2.2. And if you do the math based on what our population estimate is now, we should have about 260 officers. We're allocated, authorized for 206. 203, excuse me about that. So I've always looked at the police department, the majority of my career as being underfunded in that capacity. because we do not have enough officers to just respond to the calls, just normal calls. And I understand the argument that some of the people make about defunding, which is, I don't know the definition of defunding police myself. I mean, it changes whoever's speaking at the time. I'm not sure what definition we're using, but I think this is an opportunity to make an assessment, to really look at the calls for service that police officers are doing. We have, as a police department, we have really filled the void for a lot of things, mental health issues, mental illness, substance use disorder, homelessness. We've really filled those voids and those gaps that services didn't exist. And we're doing that in the capacity of an understaffed department. And that's my perspective. And so when I hear defunding, I would actually like to hear, a concept of let's reimagine policing and shifting some of those social issues to, the crisis intervention centers and so forth, and those experts. I mentioned the social worker we have. I would love to see us multiply the number of social workers we have times, 7 or 8 if we could. However, we still have to answer those calls for service. And unfortunately, right now, we're dealing with a spike in crime, particularly violent crime. And, usually we deal with that during the summer months. And we're also dealing with COVID-19. So there's a lot of issues that are frustrating people, and we're doing the best we can. And I deal with different calls every day. And one of the calls I got today was about a fireworks complaint. And I get it, fireworks are very noisy, but I try to explain to people that, first of all, our 911 center is dispatched by Ingham County. So we contract them to dispatch. All of the calls are dispatched based on priority. So if it's a someone is injured as a result of violence, an assault, whether simple or serious, that call is going to get the attention first before a fireworks complaint is gathered. And you're absolutely right. Community police officers have a better connection with their community members because they're not responding to call. However, even our community police officers right now, we're actually using them a lot of times to answer calls, and which really takes away from their mission as far as community policing, removing them from their community to help out because there's so many calls for service. And so there's a lot of points, and certainly I agree with social services, but I don't believe that we have the capacity right now to eliminate any of our personnel, because that's what's going to happen if there are any type of budget cuts. It's going to mean numbers, reduction in police officers. And I certainly don't want to see that. And I think that if we see that, it would be reckless. It would put community members in danger. And that's my own expert opinion of what I see and read about on reports and calls every single day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Green. And thank you, Greater Lansing community. That concludes our program. I want to thank you all for joining the conversation. And now I will turn the program over to Kimberly Coleman, Director of Human Relations and Human Services. Have a wonderful evening. You are on mute. Director Coleman, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Chief Green. And thank you, Lansing community, for your part in this tonight. It's been great just listening to the input that we've gotten thus far. And the concerns that you've shown us by your presence has been a very meaningful gesture to all that's involved. I do want to extend a heartfelt thank you to the city staff who were instrumental in helping us to make tonight happen. But also Lori Adams Simon, for the job that she did, outstanding, Lori, and the support of the Mayor's Diversity and Inclusion Council. And a special thank you to Hope Hope Rollins, all occasions, and I didn't say the name right, for the outstanding video. She really did a good job there for us. We will have another community input session coming up on August 6th, where the topic will be police budgeting. So we'll be able to talk more with Chief Green around budgets. We'll also do another on the 20th of August, where we'll be seeking your input again. And just so you know, we welcome other opportunities for sharing your ideas and suggestions and concerns. And so if you have groups of people that you think would like for any of us to come out and speak, if you want one-on-ones, if you want to submit emails to us, we have a survey online. We welcome all of that. Otherwise, it's been a great evening. And again, I thank you and I wish you a good night.